And welcome to another long overdue episode of The Fat Minute. I'm joined tonight by my co-host BVJ,
Hello.
and we're joined by our good buddy Mike.
Howdy.
And we're finally finishing up our ranking of the X-Men movies. Part 3 finale tonight. We're ranking the the Wolverine trilogy, X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Wolverine, and Logan. And of course, I am your high and caffeinated host Don John, and I'm ready to get into it. So let's start off. I missed you boys. I missed the fans, all three of them.
Including us.
Yeah. Let's start with, we'll go in, of course, release order of each of these movies. We'll start off with X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, I saw this movie for the first time shortly after the DVD came out. I didn't see it in theaters. And I remember watching it back then and being like, I don't know why everybody's giving this movie shit. It wasn't that bad. And then I watched it for the second time right before we did this episode. And 2010 Don John needed to shut the fuck up because this movie is that bad. um, a second a revisit did not make the experience any better. Um, no, like this movie is notoriously awful, and I gave it too much credit the first time I saw it back in like 2010, and I think part of that is because, ironically, even though this movie is trash, the video game tie-in was actually really good. um, which is ironic because a lot of video game tie-ins for movies are garbage. But ironically, a really bad movie had a very fun video game tie-in, and I think that might have contributed to my rose-colored glasses of the movie back then because I played the game way before. I played the game before I watched the movie, but yeah, revisiting this movie, it's such garbage. Like the plot doesn't make sense within itself. It doesn't make sense within the wide range of the entire franchise. Like it contradicts a lot of different things. Um, it's also just oh god. Um, it's also just like one thing that really burned me on this movie was I ever since the first movie I was always like, when are they gonna put Gambit in these movies? Because he's my favorite X-Men. I'm like, when are we gonna get to see him? And I remember seeing the commercials for this movie, and he's in the trailer and everything. I'm like, fuck yeah, we're finally gonna get Gambit in an X-Men movie. And he's barely in the movie, and he just kind of gets his ass kicked around every time he is in the movie. um, Also, just I don't care about any of the characters at all in this movie. It's silly. The acting's not great. I mean, of course, we've all seen those CGI claws that just look like a Saturday morning cartoon. Um, just there is nothing redeemable about this movie. It is a glorified hot dumpster fire from beginning to end. Um, no, this is easily an F for me. Like I can't be any more blunt than that. Go ahead, Mike.
So, I have a kind of a funny background with this movie. This movie was super hyped up on my senior year of high school. And it actually came out, I think, 2 days after my birthday.
Yeah.
Happy
Yeah,
birthday.
yeah. So that was kind of like my 18th birthday extravaganza. So me and like a bunch of the guys from high school, like we all got together like in the neighborhood outside my house and hung out before the movie and was all excited. I even remember like how Donnie was super excited for Gambit. Trevor was the same way with Deadpool because those were the first time we ever saw Deadpool and had like Ryan Reynolds. That was when Ryan Reynolds was cast.
Hmm.
And Trevor even kind of sort of like dressed up as him. He wore like kind of the X Men Origins thing where he wore the a sleeveless red shirt and he had like toy katanas on his back. It was funny. So we were all like super pumped for this movie, and I remember coming out of the theater. We saw it at the Frostburg Theater, and it was kind of like your reaction, Donnie. I was kind of like, yeah, it was all right. Yeah, I mean, the action scenes were really cool, and I liked the cameos or whatever.
Hmm.
But just as time went on, and I rewatched it quite a few times, it just got worse and worse with every viewing. The one thing that I was always like, no, this is stupid, was what they ended up doing to Deadpool when they made him into Weapon 11.
Yeah.
And we actually knew that coming in because there was the whole like action figure leak.
Right.
And it's just like, I guess we kind of were like, oh, well, maybe this is like a transitional thing. Like he'll go from that to the actual Deadpool.
Nope.
It's like they didn't even really try, other than that like after credit scene where his decapitated head like shushes at you. His mouth is like magically like ripped back open. But I don't know what was going through their heads with that. It's like, okay, let's take the character who's known as the Merc with a mouth
Hmm.
and get rid of the mouth.
Yeah. Let's get rid of the his banter that is like 90% of his character.
Yeah, it's like let's just like give him Wolverine's powers along with a bunch of other people's powers, and let's put his swords in his arms
Because
and,
fuck you.
and seal up his mouth. He'll be a silent killer. It's like, well, why don't you just make a brand new character?
Like like seeing all this shit and seeing that like that they just straight up missed the point of Deadpool that badly. I'm convinced that this movie was really like somebody trying to sabotage this franchise from the inside.
Yeah, and I
I
had
think.
seen. No,
Well,
go,
my bad, my bad.
no, you can go ahead, Blake.
I feel like one of the problems is this is one of those superhero movies that was made by a committee more than like an actual, a unified vision.
I don't even think
Yeah,
it was made by a committee. I think it was made by a sentient bag of cocaine.
yeah, and this movie also had like a bunch of writers that were like fired and hired. Like this movie had like a ton of writers that went through. Um, I think even a bunch of directors. I remember even at one point they wanted Zack Snyder to direct it, but he's like, "Well, if I'm making a Wolverine movie, I want it to be rated R," and they're like, "No way." And years later, they were wrong because, like with Logan,
Yeah.
it kind of worked out for him. But but I mean, to talk about like the titular character like Wolverine, I mean, Hugh Jackman, I don't think ever does a bad job.
Mhm.
But you can tell, like even as good as Hugh Jackman is, like just the writing and the script and the direction for this movie is terrible. So
Hmm.
even he can't save it. And another thing I always thought of, if you're gonna do X-Men Origins Wolverine, they didn't even focus really on his origins. Like the only thing they really focused on is him getting his adamantium skeleton. I mean, but that's not even his defining character.
Yeah.
I feel like that should be like the end of the movie. That should be like because they
Or at
made a
least later.
yeah, or like they made it because normally when he gets his adamantium claws, that's when he loses his memory. But they like extended it out, and then he got shot in the head and whatever.
Hmm.
But I think they should have focused on the stuff that they made a montage at the beginning of the movie. Like the first 15 minutes of this movie is more interesting than the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
That that whole opening thing where him and Sabretooth where they do the actual comic book that's called Origin, where he's like the son of a wealthy Canadian man back in the 1800s, and you see his real name's James Howlett, and the whole thing of him and Sabretooth fighting in like World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, or and actually they started in the Civil War. That's more interesting than the actual movie, and also the whole Team X thing. Like, if you want to show other mutants, it's like, okay, well, that was in the comics. Show Wolverine and Sabretooth and Team X.
Hmm.
That should have been the majority of this movie. He should have either gotten his claws in either the final act of the movie or at the very end. And
Well,
literally, like, that would have been a cool way to like segue back to the original movies, like where he had those flashbacks where like he escapes Alkali Lake.
hmm.
That would have been a kind of a. I think that would be a great final shot. Like you just recreate that shot of him running down the hallway and then shutting the door, and it just ends because you know where it goes after that.
It also doesn't help that like I don't understand William Stryker's reason for putting adamantium in Wolverine. Because his intention is to put it in Weapon X, but he's like, hey, here's this guy who I know wants to kill like all of us. Let's make him even stronger. Like,
Yeah, and then it's this contrived ploy. Well, we only did it for him so we could see it could work on Weapon 11.
right.
And it's like, well, then just do another one if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, well, you didn't
Buy
really
another
care
one, you
about.
rich motherfucker.
It's like you didn't really care about Deadpool's livelihood, and at that time, Deadpool wasn't a mutant, so it's like, well, just get some other asshole and test it on.
Yeah.
It's like just get Wolverine's DNA, and that's all you need. You didn't need to turn him into a weapon, which it it felt like it felt like it was written by an edgy 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem too. This movie is fan service. The movie they're just throwing in cameos to do it. Like, I mean, Wolverine and Sabretooth have always been rivals, and then like the book Origin, he has a half brother character that's similar to him. So they're like, well, why don't we just make it Sabretooth?
Yeah.
And they're like, we haven't gotten Gambit yet. Throw him in there. What's he gonna do? I don't know, but put him in there.
And that
It-
Professor X cameo at the end.
And then yeah, and that was awful. And then it's like, oh, let's throw Cyclops in there. It's like people like Cyclops, right? And then, or like the one cameo that really killed me is like Wolverine's love interest when they're like letting all the mutant prisoners out. They're like, oh, her sister happens to be Emma Frost. How the fuck is that? I don't know, but just do it. That's my that's my Kyle producer at Fox. I don't. The fans will like it.
They shoehorn in Cyclops into this movie, and it's like, why didn't you just put more Cyclops into your fucking X-Men trilogy? Like,
Yeah. I will say though, the one standout I actually like in this movie is Liev Schreiber as Sabretooth. I actually really liked. I thought his performance was really well, and what he's given, I think he does a good job. And I think him and Hugh Jackman actually. I think it was Hugh Jackman's idea to bring him in. And even though I really like Tyler Mane in the first movie, he really is just kind of a glorified stuntman.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he looks more comic book accurate, but like Liev Schreiber actually gave him like character and a personality, and he has a lot of dialogue, and he's kind of the main villain up until you see obviously that Stryker is. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's the diamond in the turd. But
The corn kernel.
yeah, he's the shining golden kernel. But uh, yeah, not much else. The love interest of Wolverine was not good, and I hate how they tried to Batman Begins this shit where like
I also love how they they portray Wolverine to be like legitimately retarded in this movie. Like the way they fake his love interest's death. Like it just she's like with the flashback when it shows how they faked her death. She's just laying on the ground while Sabretooth just pours fake blood all over her. It's like, what?
it's like,
what?
it's like you have like enhanced senses. Like you can't tell that she's breathing.
Right.
yeah,
Or that the blood isn't hers. Like,
Yeah, you couldn't smell the blood or whatever.
no,
Like now,
they legit made Wolverine a goddamn moron in this movie.
well, and also too like I was getting back to like with his name, like they have to make up this stupid ass like cringy like Native American like poem where she
Yeah.
says like that's how he gets his name. It's like no, he got his name because he's a short fucking hairy dude that's pissed off and he slaps people at the wall. Like that's where it came from.
Yeah.
They have to make some stupid ass like poem shit. Like this was like the trend where like when they were retelling people's origin stories, they had to come up with like a dumb reason for why they got their name.
it was like it's like a reverse of what you said the other day in a Facebook conversation, Michael, about how Tim Burton took the Penguin and Catwoman too literally, and he
Yeah.
like tried to make the Penguin like a mutant penguin, and he tried to make Catwoman like have cat superpowers and stuff. It's like it's the reverse of that. It's like no, he's called the Wolverine because, like you said, like he's short and hairy and he scratches shit. Like
And pissed off all the time. Yeah, it's like no, there isn't like no like context. There's no peek behind the curtain. Like it's a very obvious nickname.
Yeah.
But yeah, I other than Liev Schreiber, yeah, like this movie's an F. Like looking back, like one of the things I liked as a younger lad, I liked the action, but the action is just
as
ridiculous.
a younger lad.
Younger lad, yeah. I was gonna say younger kid, but I was like I wasn't a kid then. but it's just over the top. It's like a fucking cartoon. Like
Hmm.
Wolverine's like riding on a tank that explodes and it launches him like a slingshot, and then he goes into a helicopter and takes it down. Like you feel like you're watching like Wile E. Coyote fight the Roadrunner.
And also, fucking Sabretooth helping Wolverine fight Deadpool at the end is so fucking dumb because it makes no sense. Like he just shows up. If nobody kills you but me,
Yeah.
what?
And then yeah, and then they do the Batman, the Adam West Batman around. They're like back to back.
Yeah.
I've seen someone like edit it and they put like the Batman and Robin music to it. Yeah, or like when he's going after Gambit and that like fire exit like ladders coming down, and
Mhm.
Wolverine's just flailing his arms, and it's just like cutting it
Yeah.
like cartoon
Oh my
paper.
god. Yeah.
It's like, what were they thinking, man?
Mm.
Yeah, but yeah, this movie's an F for me.
Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, like when I think of that moment that you just said, Michael, where like the fire exit ladder is coming down, he's slashing it. It's just to try to believe that this movie takes place within the same world as Logan is like trying to pretend that the Adam West Batman takes place in the same world as the Robert Pattinson Batman. Like it's just
It's
I'm
Avi Arad. It's the untold story.
yeah, like I'm trying to do the math in my head and it's just not checking out.
It's
But
the untold story. Well, now it's the forgotten story.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um no, I mean when I first saw this, when I wore a younger man's clothes, it's just I just remember this was the month we got egg on our face because we were like, "Oh yeah, X-Men Origins Wolverine, that's gonna rule the month of May," and this is 2009, and it's like, who cares about a Star Trek reboot? And it's like, well, congratulations, you played yourself. Um, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like the movie's terrible. It's just it's dookie, but I mean, if I had the chance to go back to the day and night that we saw it, like hell yeah. Like you said, Michael, it was your birthday. We hung out in your neighborhood. We were all having a good time. Bless you.
Thank you.
Um, but yeah, it's just like and it's like well, it's like, well, that has nothing to do with the movie itself. But it's like sometimes that just helps. Sometimes it's just like the nostalgia around seeing a movie, just the memory of it. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a rerun because I know we touched on this like in the 2009 episode, but it's it's just not good. I mean, I remember to add on that, like how you were excited for Gambit Donnie and Trevor was excited for Deadpool. Kogel, God love him, was like, "Oh yeah, they're finally doing Agent Zero in a movie," and I watched it. I'm
Who?
like, and
Yeah,
I'm,
I'm the lone person excited for.
and I'm like, I'm like, I'm like, Kogel. God, again, I love you, but you really are a sucker for a character whose entire superpower and personality is guns. Like it's like the scene in History, or yeah, History Men. Jesus Christ, like the scene in Mystery Men where they're like, "Wait, so that's your superpower? You're good at guns? Like that's kind of lame." Um, but but yeah, I mean, you have
And he's one of the most laughable characters in the movie.
Yeah.
yeah, and then
I love when he's in the helicopter and he's just like.
and I'm sorry, like musicians turned actors, it really just depends on what kind of a character they're playing. Like, Elvis Presley in Jailhouse Rock the movie, or Tupac in Poetic Justice, or Ice Cube in Boys in the Hood, and Eminem in The 8 Mile. But like, whose idea was it to put Will I Am in this movie? Like,
You
what?
shouldn't have done that. Now I gotta kill you.
Yeah, you shouldn't have done that. I got that boom boom pow. But
Why'd you call him the blood?
um, and also it's just like nothing makes any damn sense. Like William Stryker is kidnapping other mutants against their will, but then he goes through this like long-winded reverse psychology of like trying to convince Wolverine to get the procedure done. And I'm like, why didn't you just do it against his will like you did with everyone else. Like,
And also, like, he straight up kills a general when the general tries to shut his project down. I'm like, okay, there's no way this dude, like, would just be able to walk away from all of this and nobody know about it.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
and it's like this movie feels like it had 12 different writers and 6 different directors. Like, there is I mean, the whole thing kind of like is the same shade of a turd, but like it's very like it really does not have a singular vision. And I mean, my reaction to like the final act of this movie is kind of like what Red Letter Media's not that I agree with this, but it was kind of like Red Letter Media's sentiments towards Justice League the Snyder Cut, where like they're like the movie should have just ended with the Justice League standing at the top of that like nuclear reactor lined up and they're waiting for the jet to pick them up. Like just end it there. But it kept going and it's doing like the nightmare segment and it's doing the Martian Manhunter. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, why didn't you end? Like, that's how I felt with this movie. I'm like, the obvious ending to this movie is Logan having the procedure done and becoming the Wolverine and coming out and flipping out and like killing like the laboratory and running away. But then it just kept going. And I'm like, why? I,
The problem is because that's like only like 30 minutes into the movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
like this,
Like,
this exactly. And it's like what I said in one of the other X-Men episodes. It's like, it's almost like Fox was in a hurry to do spin-offs, even though you're only supposed to settle for spin-offs. So they were in a hurry to do spin-offs, and they're like, oh, we'll just do the full origin, okay? And then they rush, and like the origin happens halfway through, and then like the second half of the movie is just like this weird epilogue. And I don't know. I don't want to ramble. It's just there's just not much more to say about this movie. It's so weird that this came out in 2009. Like this came out the year after the Marvel Cinematic Universe began and The Dark Knight, and it's like we were supposed to have superhero movies by this point at least be only okay, but it's making like all these weird decisions and mistakes and choices that you would expect from the early 2000s rather than the very end of the 2000s. Um, I appreciate the memory of like when we saw it in real life, but it's an F. It's an F. Let's just move on. Let the past die. Bury it if you have to.
Why'd you give it an F? Next up, The Wolverine. So I remember when this movie got announced, we all just kind of looked at each other and we're just kind of like, what's gonna happen? Because the previous Wolverine solo film was still very fresh on our minds. Um, I remember we saw the first trailer and we're like, okay, it could really go either way with this movie. Um, we went in, we saw it, and you know what? It ain't bad. This is a much more clean and seamless Wolverine movie. It's nothing spectacular. It's nothing game changing. It's nothing award worthy. But it is just a fun, cool popcorn flick. Like it's the bare minimum of what a Wolverine solo movie should be. A lot of action. Just a story that isn't too complicated, that gets right to the point. It's the bare minimum of a Wolverine movie, but it's still a fun time in its own right. Um, I mean, it was cool to see the Silver Samurai in a movie, even though I think it's not the portrayal I would have gone for, and not to mention he's just kind of defeated unceremoniously. Um, a lot of the choreography in the fight scenes were really cool. Like the subway scene was awesome in this movie. That scene still sticks out to me. I mean, it's a fun movie, and for that, I give it a solid, respectable C. Go ahead, Mike.
um, funny thing is, I actually missed when you guys saw it in theaters, and I ended up not watching it until like a couple months ago.
Oh damn.
Yeah, I don't know why it took me so long to see it. It wasn't that I didn't want to see it, I just never bothered to until now. And I was just like, well, hey, it's on HBO Max at the time. I was like, well, I'll watch it.
It's on the hobo.
It's on the hobo. And Yeah, I pretty much agree with the same thing. I actually think for the first like 2 acts of this movie, it's like a really good kind of like crime movie. I feel
Hmm.
it feels almost kind of like a. I mean, it's not necessarily the Yakuza, but like it feels kind of like a Japanese like Yakuza movie. Like
Hmm.
you, and I think this is where kind of like Hugh Jackman and like James Mangold's decided, we need to kind of step up our game and kind of ground it as much as we can in a world of mutants and stuff like that. Um, I think the whole plot with like Wolverine trying to find a way to like finally die. I thought that was really interesting. Um, but then the final act kind of loses me a little bit. The final act is kind of lackluster compared to the rest of the movie.
Hmm.
When you start getting into like where you find out who the Silver Samurai is and stuff like that, it's kind of I don't know. It's just, and that was the kind of the funny thing is that I'm watching this movie and I like this movie, but I'm like, I kind of want more X-Men stuff. It's like, can we see Wolverine fight someone with powers? And then when it gets to him like fighting a Marvel supervillain, I'm like, yeah, I don't really like this. And I don't know. I don't know if it just put a bitter taste in my mouth that like the Silver Samurai ends up being the guy that he saved all the way back in World War II. It's just like, man, it's like the dude who like saved your ass all them years ago is like you're gonna repay him by taking his powers and killing him. I was like, well, that's real nice. But yeah, I will say I kind of want more in this kind of aspect. Maybe not this. Maybe when the MCU gets to Wolverine, whatever. I would like to see like Wolverine in Japan, like during and after World War II, like when the comics say like how he trained to be a samurai. I was like, I wanted to see more samurai stuff. This is
Hmm.
more of like a modern day crime movie. But yeah, it's fun. Like the action's really good. I think James Mangold's a good director. I would give this because of the final act. I give it like a B minus,
I think
almost a.
I think the problem with the final act is that I don't know about you, but to me, it looks like aesthetically speaking, it looks and feels too much like the final act of an Iron Man movie.
Yeah, it
I mean,
does.
either way, it just doesn't match the rest of the movie. Like,
Right, right.
Yeah, they kind of made Silver Samurai does kind of like remind me of like Ironmonger.
Hmm.
Yeah, Silver Samurai should have just been an actual samurai, not like a mech suit.
Right. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Blake.
so this has to be like the first time I've been I've been asked to speak about this movie or to share. This is the first time I've like had the chance to share an opinion on this movie since the day I saw it in theaters. Like it was such a weird experience because after we got out of it, we were like, okay, but then we never talked about it ever again. Like I was almost starting to wonder if it actually happened,
I
like,
was
or if it
busy
was like,
that day.
yeah, if it was like this weird shared dream that we all had, like a Mandela effect that like was shared. I don't know, but it's just kind of weird. Like nobody talks about this movie. Nobody ever brought it up, and I'm afraid that there is a legitimate reason for that. I don't dislike this movie at all, and I don't really technically have anything bad to say about it. Though I'm going to be brutally honest, this has to be hands down the most forgettable movie in the X-Men 20th Century Fox saga. Like the entire mutant universe of Fox, this just has to be the most forgettable movie. It's okay. And I don't mean it's only okay in the same respects as like Thor the Dark World where it's annoying that it's only okay. It's all right, like I had no displeasure. I had no dislikes when I saw it that one time, but I I just barely remember this movie, and I saw it less than 10 years ago. And the last time I saw Indiana Jones Crystal Skull was over 10 years ago, and I could almost tell you every single thing that happens in that movie beat by beat. Um, but I mean, it is. it is a much more competent movie than Origins Wolverine, and I feel like that is the only reason why so many people like don't bother to have anything negative to say about it. I'm not saying it automatically deserves negativity, but they're just comparing it to Origins Wolverine. And I feel like I have the best metaphor I can use here is comparing this movie to Origins Wolverine is like comparing the moderate average C student in the classroom that, never makes any trouble, never makes a fuss, sometimes raises his hand and gets an easy softball question right, and just does his homework and turns it in and just, stays, just another seat amongst the desks. It's like comparing that student to the kid that's constantly farting until he shits himself and his khakis are now completely brown. Um, sure, sure, the first student is a legitimately better student, but who's the student that you grow up and want to tell more stories about? Like
I love you,
that's
Drew McGann.
oh man. Yeah, this movie is it's a C. It's a C. There's just not much more to say about it. I mean, I think it has little moments here and there that are cool, but ultimately, like, it's just a very straightforward, walking, a comfortable line, average movie.
Mhm.
I also think a lot of people forgot about this movie because literally the after credit scene of this movie segues into Days of Future Past, and
Oh yeah,
everybody pumped for that, so that probably didn't help.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you see New Mutants though? By the way,
I did
I have
not.
I have not either.
that that might beat this for the most forgettable X-Men movie.
I mean, yeah, I guess if you do count that as
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a spin-off movie, but
yeah.
yeah, that that may, if you want to lump them all together, that may be it.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I will take your word for it.
All right, last movie of the night, Logan. I mean, the second I saw the trailers and everything for this movie, I was hooked. I was pumped. I was ready for this movie, and I was counting down to it the entire time. And I saw it in theaters, and I was not disappointed. It more than delivered. I mean, this was the Wolverine solo movie that we needed, and it was great to have it, and it was great to have Hugh Jackman, wrap up on the character with a movie like this. And I mean, what's so great about this movie is it's not like other superhero movies, like at all. It's very minimalistic. It's more inspired by old westerns than it is other superhero movies. It's inspired by those more than it is movies of a similar or identical genre. And I mean, you even see it in the final act. The final act isn't some world-ending doomsday device or some giant monster that's going to blow everything up. It's just Wolverine fighting an army in the woods. It did such a great finale for the character. I mean, I could go on and on about this movie. I love this movie. Um, and I thought what they did with X-23 was really cool to get her in there. Um, no, I love this movie. It's an easy A for me. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. This movie, I think, is what a lot of Wolverine fans were waiting for. They were waiting for a more dark, gritty, rated R version of the character. Because I mean, although they're not going to make a rated R X-Men movie, like a
Hmm.
Wolverine R movie is very plausible. And this movie, it's not. I would say it's like 20-30% Old Man Logan. It's kind of Old Man Logan minus all the weird, crazy comic book stuff.
Right,
But it's kind of the thing. It's kind of sort of a dystopian world. It's kind of like a dystopian world for mutants
right.
and him, like, being old and his powers are starting to finally fail him.
It's not dystopian. He's just in the desert.
Yeah, but it feels that way. It's like like he has like a limo job, and they're still and humans are still doing their own thing, but like
Right.
it feels very dystopian for mutants. And yeah, like you said, how it's very much like a western. I remember James Mangold said the reason why this movie's called Logan, other than they were running out of fucking names to call a Wolverine movie, uh, it was that he was inspired by the western called Shane, so he just wanted to use Logan's name. So I thought that was kind of a fun reference. Probably one of my favorite, besides Hugh Jackman, is I can't remember the girl's name, but the little girl that played X-23,
Daphne
I thought
Keene.
she was great. Yeah, yeah, she was great in this movie. I always
Hmm.
loved it because I was a big fan of the cartoon X-Men Evolution. That's my favorite X-Men cartoon.
Hmm.
And she, like Harley Quinn, like she came from that show. And I feel like a lot of people don't know that. And I remember even seeing that episode when it first aired and thinking that was kind of cool, like this young child that's like a clone of Wolverine that has his powers and is used as kind of like was being used the way they wanted to use Wolverine. And I thought that was a really cool idea. And I thought they executed it perfectly, especially the kind of the father daughter bond that they eventually create
Hmm.
throughout the movie. And that's kind of the core of this movie is it's kind of like in the last days of Logan, he gets to be a father, and he kind of gives hope to mutant kind at the end.
And also, he not just be a father, but he also gets to be a son with a lot of the scenes with him and Professor X in this movie.
Yeah, and this the stuff with Professor X, like it just like it gut punches you.
Hmm.
Uh, There's even I'm even willing to say maybe even gut punches you a little too much. And I know that's what they're going for, and I love dark tragic stories, but just what they imply and how like Professor X like killed most, if not all, the X Men. Like I don't know, and for that to be kind of like the end all be all of like the X Men movies until whatever the MCU does, like it kind of stings. I was like, I don't really want it to end like this. I was like, I mean, I don't want some like hunky dory happy ending, but like, yeah, I was like, I don't want everybody to be dead.
I mean, just seeing Professor X going on a senile, rambling rant in and of itself is pretty goddamn heartbreaking.
Yeah, and Patrick Stewart really got to shine. He got to really do something different than being, the wise, all-knowing mentor that never does anything wrong and always has the right answer.
Yeah, he fucking tells Logan how he really feels more than once in this movie.
Yeah, you see him like really at his most vulnerable. And um, as far as negatives, I will say I thought the villains could have been a little better. That I feel like that's the only problem I really have with this movie is that the villains could have been better. Like that one actor, he was the lead in the Bad Predator movie. I think it's Boyd Holbrook. I think he wasn't bad as like kind of like the lead henchman,
Hmm.
but I I guess you could say the main bad guy is that one actor. I can't think of his name. He played like Loki from an alternate reality.
Richard E. Grant.
Yeah, Richard E. Grant. I guess he's supposed to be kind of the main bad guy because like he was the one like capturing mutants and like kill. He said they were like killing them off and then like making clones of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just. But I will say is like if they're gonna go as far with that character, then they're like, well, why don't they just make that guy Mister Sinister? Like, and that's another thing. Like, I've been wanting Mister Sinister in an X Men movie ever since the get go. He's always been my favorite X Men villain. He's always been one of the biggest X Men villains, and they've yet to do him. And the funny thing is, X Men, I think it was Apocalypse, had like a cameo thing with like the Essex Corp,
Hmm.
and that's Mister Sinister's name, Nathaniel Essex, and it's just like, and they still haven't done anything with him. They've just referenced the Essex Corp a couple times, and that's it. But all in all, like this movie for me is a solid A. Like if you haven't seen it, it's a must watch for comic book fans and non comic book fans alike.
All right, close this out, Blake.
So yeah, I mean, I I feel like I'm gonna bum some people out here, and that's only because like this is a great movie and I really like it, but it's just, it- I guess, like, kind of sort of
Hmm.
like the previous movie, but in a better way. I just don't have much to say about it other than it's good and I liked it. I mean, it's hands down the best of the Wolverine movies. Like, but that wasn't a tough race, guys. Um,
Talk about
and
tortoise in the hair.
it's surely one of the better X-Men movies. Like, it's just, and it's one of those things where it's like sometimes it's okay for, well, most of the time you have to accept this, but like we can't get stuck on whether or not a comic book movie is 100% comic book accurate. Like, it takes from stuff, it has it, it cherry picks, but then it just tries to be a good movie. And it, reminds us that some things aren't worth doing like shot for shot, panel for panel, or some things just don't translate that well across mediums. And yeah, I mean, much like how, the new Batman movie right now, which we'll get to talk about it eventually coming up, I hope, but just so it's said right away, is fucking amazing and awesome. But, the new Batman is a detective noir, or, Captain America the Winter Soldier was a espionage thriller, and, so on and so forth. Like, this is like very much like a modern, or I guess a futuristic western, and it works beautifully. Um, because the main western that um, what's the director's name here? I mean, he did the last movie too, but
James Mangold.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was the movie Shane, I believe,
Yeah,
and you can tell that like that was one that he felt a lot of love for when he made this, and he even puts it in the movie. But yeah, I mean, like Hugh Jackman, like, yeah, there's a reason why there's a reason why it was probably out of the question for Hugh Jackman to come back for Dark Phoenix, because he wanted this to be his final Wolverine outing and
Hmm.
end on a high note. Like, it very much made sense. Um, and then like this is just as much of, well, we'll see how Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness plays out, but as far as like, beforehand, before the Disney purchase, like this was very much, just as much, a farewell to Patrick Stewart as Professor X.
Hmm.
And I mean, shit, that's just as emotional. Um, but yeah, I have to agree with Michael. Like, the whole Wolverine clone, like, that should have just been Sabretooth some way, somehow. They should have just
Yeah.
found a way to bring back Lieb Schreiber.
well, they were
Um,
going to, but they cut it out.
Yeah, like maybe, yeah, like it's just, I don't know. I'm not one for like clones in movies, or like, like doppelgangers, like unless it's like played for to be goofy or whatever. But like this movie's like dead serious, and it's a Hugh Jackman clone, and I'm like, I feel like this movie was trying to be smarter than this. Um, but I mean, nonetheless, I'm not going to keep you in suspense. This is an A. To repeat Donnie, it's an easy A. It's just one that I can't really go on and on about for too long. By my own standards, at least, it's good. It is good, very well done, and yeah, thanks for ending it on a high note.
It is really weird how throughout these movies, Wolverine's arch nemesis really like doesn't have any sort of real major impact.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That-
that's where they kind of dropped the ball on.
mhm.
They should have for the last movie like had an iconic comic book villain.
Yeah.
hmm yeah. And I mean, like, I like Richard E. Grant, but it's like, yeah, like hell,
Yeah,
like if you would have put him in some makeup with that voice, like I feel like that could have been a pretty cool Mr. Sinister.
yeah. That would have been the one time to have like. I mean, the whole movie's kind of like not trying to be comic booky, but that would have been like the one time to like throw something in.
Yeah.
I feel like that would have been terrifying, like with the tone and mood of the rest of this movie. If you were to have like Richard E. Grant wear that makeup, like that'd be creepy as shit.
I mean, like you don't have to give him like the crazy Count Dracula costume, but just like make him like pale white and he has like red eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, shit,
Yeah.
if I saw a guy like that at the supermarket, I'd be terrified.
Yeah. I mean, if you went
Yeah,
to
okay, Cradle of Filth just dropped a new album.
I mean, if you went to the LaVale Walmart at 2 a.m., you would very much see that guy.
Yeah.
It's,
He would
it's
he,
just,
he wouldn't be he wouldn't be an evil master of genetics, but he'd have a lot of DNA hovering about him.
and I guess like one final critique or just point I can make about Logan is, and I know this is like me like mind-numbingly missing the point, but I've had multiple chances to revisit this movie, I guess, but like it's so damn sad. Like,
I haven't,
It
I've only
is.
watched it that one time.
yeah, and it's just like and again, I'm not docking it points for that, but I'm just talking about its revisit value because like it's a heavy movie to digest.
Yeah,
Like it's
don't watch this after you've had a bad day at work or something.
yeah,
No,
no,
no. Yeah, this isn't like. I mean, it came out during blockbuster times, but this movie's not a blockbuster. This is like a tragic, farewell to a character.
well, it was
Which
like it was early 2017 because so this came out like a month and a half after Donald Trump just got inaugurated, and it just it was just not a happy season.
a funny story about this movie. I saw this in theaters with my girlfriend at the time, and we sat through the whole movie. Movie ends, credits start rolling. I look over at her and she just goes, "Oh my God, that was so violent." And I just go, "I know, wasn't it awesome?"
Yeah,
I mean, it's a short angry dude with knives for hands. What do you think was gonna happen?
yeah. That's the exciting part. It's the other stuff they talk about and imply that's depressing.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
yeah, like the farmer family or whatever. I was like, man, like this is just bumming me the fuck out.
Yeah. It's like, where's Magneto when you need him?
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, that is our episode tonight. Bit of a short one, but hey, that's okay. Still had a good time. It was nice being back. It's fun how, for the most part, we're all three of us are pretty much on the same page as these movies, which slightly surprising to me. Um, but no, it was a good time. Glad we finally got to wrap this up. Hope to be back soon with another episode. So on that note, you can be sure to find this episode on Spotify, YouTube, Pandora, all the fun stuff tomorrow. iTunes podcast as well. And be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Fat Minute Radio. You can follow my co-host at BVJ. Not, I'm sorry, at Puka Saucy and all that stuff. And you can follow me at Don John Laughs. So on that note, thank you, fuck you,